for truth.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean, and this is episode 33.
33.
Which is a pretty occult, sacred number.
Yeah. What do we got for on deck today? So we're going to do some more Cosmic Summit because we got a few more things we want to
Yeah, we've got a couple different talks. Drew covered one, I covered one.
Yeah, I basically finished my one from before because Dr. Robert Schoch's presentation, when I went back to see where I had left off,
I had
a whole hour left and I didn't realize.
You had left off right at the point of the information we wanted to know.
Yeah.
Because we had heard his Sphinx stuff and we hadn't talked about it necessarily on the podcast before, so that was good.
I think he had a 2-hour time slot, whereas most people had
he must have been, he was on the main stage, I think.
Yeah,
so he had keynote time versus
Yeah, that makes sense because I got through an hour.
Because the other speakers were usually an hour. And I thought there was just a little bit
left. And I was like, I think it's, the only thing I must have missed was that. But actually, there's more. So, I'll be finishing some of that. And I got some more slides for Dean to look at while we do this. And
then I covered the talk by Dan Warren, which is a nice UFO talk. Drew listened to it previously.
Most of it, yeah. I just haven't seen any of the...
Spark some good discussion.
We've got a comment,
we got some comments. Yeah. Let's hop into that. So, Greg 2846 on YouTube comments to us back after we covered his comment on the previous show. He says, "Wow, thank you guys for the extended reference to my comment. I'm really honored. Of course, I'm not seeing this in just black and white scenario. There's possibility that some of these entities might be neutral or even benevolent, but we just don't have enough data to jump to any conclusions here in favor of either side. That's at least what I think. You made a very valuable remark that they keep themselves hidden from us, not coming forward, and are always one step in front of us. This is a very red flag indeed. Also, the fact that they seem to be able to affect and even create our emotions is quite dodgy in itself, don't you think? So yeah, caution advised. Further research to be continued."
Yeah. And I just reread my comment back to him. But it honestly, that's kind of where I was headed, where I was thinking, because just the whole topic of everything that we know to exist, has good, bad, neutral qualities, really,
Yeah.
There's always the duality, not to be cliche, but, it's the duality of everything, right? And I think that duality, and where I was going to go with it as far as the creating and emotions and all that, it could be that, what we've talked about before, the simulation theory, whether it be a computer simulation or some kind of bioengineer, or
spiritual quantum simulation,
stuff,
right?
But that it still begs the question of, is there a creator of that, right? Or is it a natural process of some other bigger thing that's going on?
Or from The Secret History, the idea of was it the did they have a term for the creator, the ultimate mover that they favored in Secret History? The prime mover, the thing that made everything come to be, because there was that, and then there was.
So the sun god is the one they reference a lot as being the one who roared and created matter out of energy.
Right, but before that, before even that, like the existence of gods and spirit
of
beings,
everything.
like
Right,
of
right.
everything.
I don't know that
like
they do.
a Big Bang moment. I think they just called it God.
Yeah,
like,
I think it was like the capital G God that they
or
kind of
like
reference.
the creator. I think
Yeah,
was maybe
yeah.
a word. I like that term, the creator.
Because it's it's ambiguous as far as like what you mean by it. Because creator could be
or the prime mover would be another way to put it.
the prime force, the prime mover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
no, well, like the reason I brought that up because that's the thing that puts everything into existence, and then there was the other entity, and this is where my memory and bad with like the names. There was the other entity that like created the illusion of the material, right? It was like created this what we see when we look out, right? Which is like not exactly what was originally created. It's like some sort of
right.
thing.
There was a level, unless being is it's never been created in order. Like the energy that is in part what we are, and if you were to think like the secret history, and like if you think that consciousness never dies, right? Energy never, it just transforms. Like if like our consciousness, or not consciousness, but our beings, right? Our spirit, whatever we are. And it kind of brings in the topics of reincarnation and like all these ancient mysteries, and like the fact that there could be endless amount of civilizations or types of civilizations in our past.
Yeah.
Do
you remember?
Demiurge, that's right.
Well, that wasn't from Secret History, but that was from the Spirit Science YouTube channel, and their like big 4 hour long like conspiracy theory of everything. They call it the Demiurge, which is distinct from like the creator of all in his video, which is like essentially like the illusionist. It's the one that sets up the matrix that we're experiencing, right? Which is not true, the true depth of reality. Anyways, so I bring that up to say, like, back into like the simulation theory, right? Like, it could be that whatever beings that are interacting with us, these quote unquote gods, this Hathor character, and their whoever is of her ilk,
or other aliens, quote unquote.
Yeah, like maybe they have some ability to, like they know the distinction between the illusion and the reality behind it, and they can somehow manipulate the illusion, and in so doing, things, quote unquote physical material universe
responds,
is just that projection, right? Like,
yeah,
so
it's responding,
like if
to
the real
input
creation
code
is the actual like universe, then our physical world is the matrix. It's the computer code. And so if you're a being who isn't like has an understanding of that difference, maybe you can manipulate that computer code to make changes, and in such like implant emotions and whatnot into people. Because it's really common in like the UFO phenomenon for people to like, when they come into contact with whatever entity, like they get hit with this like overwhelming sense of fear that like stops them in their tracks.
Yeah. Dude, that makes me think that the Matrix is like as told in the trilogy, right?
Yeah.
Is like so like you were saying, like you were referencing in that, is like we are, the physical reality is the code being writ for something else. So what if that something else is the creator itself? What if it's a perpetuating thing, right? So what if we are creating the AI and artificial intelligence, and we are the code being written and to create that, and that is what in turn enslaves us to be code writers or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like energy.
Or maybe it's like setting up the next layer of the matrix down, right?
Yeah, like that could not be the end point, right? Yeah, you're right.
Like Russian nesting dolls, there could be matrices within matrices.
Well, and that's basically, you know, describing their hypothesis on, you know, multi-dimensional stuff or why am I blanking on it? Multiverse. Gosh. Multiple universes.
But yeah,
on top of each other.
This topic is going to relate a lot to the talk I'm covering today, so we'll definitely be touching on these things a lot more.
It actually touches a little bit too on the stuff that I'm going to be talking about too, like his idea and like what ancients may have seen solar events as, and how they may have depicted them.
Yeah,
Robert Schoch talks a bit about that and a lot of the symbolism that is carried through history and all over the world.
Yeah, but like to Greg's point here is like the ability to manipulate our emotions is a power that if humans wielded it, like it would be very hard to trust someone with that power, right? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, of course. I do believe in the whole like adage that like the tool is not the thing that does the harm. It's the person that uses the tool, right? Like guns don't kill people. People kill people, right? Mm-hmm. And in a similar way, like if you have emotional manipulation technology, obviously we can very red alert up front see the dangerous uses of that for like manipulation, brainwashing, control, manipulation. But there is another side to that. Yeah. If you consider that technology, which could be for therapy, getting over PTSD, like there's all sorts of like healing and therapeutic uses that exact same technology could help people with. Like imagine someone who's going through a panic attack and you can intervene to calm them. Yep. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be benevolent or malevolent.
Step through, right. Like so it's a tool. Yeah. So the real question is like, how are they using it?
Yeah, and if it's true that there are multiple, you know, quote unquote factions or like people who or aliens or beings that have different intentions,
or if it has any, like all we can say is like human society, right? And like there are about as many motivations, about as many factions, about as many belief systems as there are humans, right? Like it's hard to say that even any two people believe the exact same thing, right?
I would say you're hard pressed to find two. I mean, maybe not hard pressed.
Like they may form into teams and alliances that have like,
but they have different experiences,
aligned motives and aligned goals, right?
Different perspectives.
But even within that, like people can rebel from that, right? Like just because
not fully agree on
you join a political party or something doesn't mean you absolutely agree with every single thing on the platform.
At least it doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
It doesn't mean people don't. But
right.
Yeah.
So I think in that same way, like if there is advanced life that has these like what seem like magic powers to us, but is probably some form of skill, technology, something like
ability, yeah.
If it follows any sort of natural law, you would expect a bell curve, right? You would expect people to fall everywhere within that bell curve and there to be entities on one side, on the other side, to the extreme on one side, to the extreme on the other, and then like the mass in the center, right? And if it doesn't follow that, then it's less likely that it's a natural phenomenon, and it may be more likely that it's some sort of form of manipulation.
Well, and that's the eyes of the beholder too, because where you might see manipulation is it could be completely, you know, benevolent, and they're just trying to guide or
what I mean is like if these entities don't fall into a bell curve, like basically everything in nature falls into a bell curve. So if they are of nature, they should as well fall into some sort of a bell curve, even if they're way more advanced than us.
Yeah.
But if they don't fall into a bell curve, like if that is not like if they don't have that same sort of distribution, then more than likely it's some sort of artificial construct.
Yeah.
It's humans from the past or from the future. Like it's something else going on,
or there's some interference
that
or something.
explains why it doesn't, because it's not natural. It would be that points to us like falling outside of nature, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love these things. I mean, that was just one comment.
Yeah, and then he commented again.
He did, yeah.
And this one, he was talking about the Trump episode.
Yeah, he kind of talks about that. He doesn't really have many views, he says, but I'll read the second part real quick. It's also interesting how the human brain works, right? How all these hypotheses are forming immediately and all these conspiracies start to circulate. But I think it's how we were made. How we're extremely lazy. Our brains are lazy, and we just love quick solutions and simple answers. And if you dig deep enough, you'll find out that it comes from a very early stages of evolution. We are primarily not like tigers or other predators. We're more like elks and rabbits. So when these animals hear a branch snap or some rustling, they straight away think predator, run. It's a survival instinct necessary to survive. Over millennia, this evolved into a much more complex system of ideas, words, and et cetera, but still works the same. We jump to the simplest conclusion. And anyway, this is a hypothesis I've heard a long time ago from someone way cleverer than me. Thank you guys. You guys do a great job.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, Greg.
Yeah,
that's a good
really
point.
insightful too.
It's a very good point.
And that's kind of part of what we're like, why we cover those conspiracies, right? Because like you can't stop people from going down them,
well,
right?
Especially with limited information, and people want to find answers as quick as possible, especially when it's something that means something to them. Right?
Exactly, because this is a meaningful event. The urgency of like assigning a narrative and like putting it into a box in your head is really it's urgent, and so you will naturally like pick one way or the other. You'll naturally like go to a sign, like, and people will do it in different ways, right? Like there's so many, like there's a variety of these shortcuts he's talking about, this laziness. There's a variety of ways that we come to these lazy conclusions. So maybe it's the first explanation you see for some people. For others, maybe they don't really necessarily care themselves. What they do care about is their social standing in their group of friends. And so what they're going to do is look to the people around them, whatever they think, they're just going to go with the flow and think the same thing. Others will be like super pro Trump or super anti Trump. And so they'll naturally be looking for a narrative that fulfills that pro need. Or anti stance. Yeah. Right. And so there's so many ways that you can fall into a trap where you don't take the time to like really think through. And that's fine. Like not everyone has to think through everything, but what distinguishes like a mature and wise person is someone who understands that that's the case. And so therefore,
takes everything with a grain of salt and is able to sift the information.
Go with a working theory and not be married to it, or at least understand that you took a shortcut. And so therefore, you can go with that as a working theory, but be open to the fact that that you took a shortcut. And so you should be open to the idea that new evidence can come in to change that.
Exactly. Yeah. Coming to conclusions is not a bad thing with limited information, as long as you're open to changing your theory or changing your understanding and not being married to it because it suits your needs.
Well, and part of it is like, if you think about like the scientific method, right? Like what is one of the most important and first steps in the scientific method is drawing out a hypothesis, right? And so if you come to an early conclusion, as long as you, like, if you can have the discipline to treat it as a hypothesis in your head, you know, maybe you're not going to do the work to do the experiment, but you still understand that you made that quick snap judgment and that you're assigning it hypothesis status in your head. That way, as information rolls in, you can reserve the ability to update.
Change your view.
But, I mean, not everyone is going to have the mental bandwidth or the interest to go into every event in huge detail. And therefore, we rely on others to update us.
Give us
on
the information
that we're not going to update ourselves on.
On that subject, to maybe segue, did you see the newer videos that are coming out of people that are far closer on the front side of the building, like between the building and Trump? Yeah. And they show like a massive police response.
Yeah. There was police walking all around the building.
It's been confirmed that they were in that building. Yes. They were stationed there.
And there was multiple snipers inside the 2-story window behind the small building. Yeah. And there was also even newer, I don't know if you've seen this yet, one of the people that was injured in the from the shooter's perspective in the bleachers that were on the other side of Trump. One of the people who was injured over there was actually recording.
Oh, really? And yeah. So you see crooks go up on the building. You can see
crooks running across the top of the building.
Yeah. With supposedly people in those second-story windows.
Well, it's
not
unclear.
That it has a great view of it, but you might hear somebody running and people shouting.
Yeah, what I've seen is unclear as to whether he was on the front section of the roof or the back section of the roof, where he was you could see his head running across. Someone could probably do the math with the perspective and the size of his head and stuff, but at least it's unclear upon first glance without doing that work to know whether he was on that front portion of roof, the part of the roof he actually shot from, or the back portion.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like because of how little you saw of it and knowing it's about 150 yards away, like you only see like maybe from the top of his shoulders up at one point.
Yeah. And then he disappears for a few seconds and then you see him pop back up.
And but it's not a complete video. Where you see him kind of like turn like this and like look around while he's laying down. Yeah. So that could be what you're seeing is when you see his head pop up again, it's him turning and like popping his head up.
I want to see more videos from that perspective because there should be a whole group of people from that side of the event who would have an indirect view of the rooftop.
Yeah. Also, the counter snipers that actually took the shot to take him out
weren't on either of those rooftops. They were a different team further away is what I heard.
I heard it was the people on the right because there was only the 2 counter snipers.
No, there was those 2 teams roofs. And then there was another. I heard there was 3 or 4 Secret Service sniper teams, but one of them was like from Trump's perspective on the stage was like forward. Like on in that direction, there was another building over there.
Okay. And then there was another one further to the right if you're looking at the stage, like even further, not behind him, but further to the right too.
Right.
I see. It just seems weird if you're going to have 4 sniper teams to not put anybody on that building, especially because it has multiple levels.
There was there's people in the building, snipers in that building on the second-story building, and there's actually photos taken from some of the teams who were there of the sniper setup from inside those windows.
Yeah, I've seen that.
But the thing is, and it's been pointed out, like if you because some of those windows were open because they were sniping out of them. But if you have the gun at the edge of the window and then you're back at the base of the gun where you're going to fire, like you're not close enough to the window to see straight down at the rooftop crooks would be on. You literally have to like put your head up to the window to see that part of the building.
But the only thing I'm confused about is like local law enforcement in the videos, you see them minutes before the shots, looking up on that roof, knowing. And if there's people in those windows, why would you not have somebody poke their head out and see what was going on? You know,
I think part of that is because there's multiple different law enforcement units.
I know there's like SWAT, standard, like, you know, cops, and then there's like the whole Secret Service. But but they mentioned there being a tactical channel that the majority of them should have been on. So like obviously it was like a failure of communication.
Right.
But yeah, it's just crazy to me that there would be that much police presence in that building, and then that would be where he ends up coming and taking the shot from. It's just an interesting.
I've been following both sides. Like for me, there's two possibilities that I give the most weight to. There's the more conspiratorial one that there was a second shooter, and like evidence is piling up for that as well. But there's more and more evidence piling up that Crooks was the only shooter.
Sure. No, yeah. I'm starting to see a lot more evidence that makes that pretty clear. You know, whether his motive was like all his own or that's all to be, because they haven't given us much information about what
right.
Like there's like all this.
Well,
stuff
there's lots of variations within Crooks being the only shooter that are more and less damning for the Secret Service, right? Like,
or even the FBI in some theories that are coming out too, or like.
Well, right. I mean, because when you're in the conspiracy world and when you've like read a bunch of this stuff, you know about things like MK Ultra, and you are not just going to accept the government saying, oh, we don't do that anymore as proof that they don't do that anymore.
Right.
And then you have like all of like the long history of FBI thwarted plots where the FBI was involved in the plots and making them happen, or even egging people on to do them.
The one where they arrested somebody that two or three FBI agents got him on board with. Like it was somebody who had some thoughts, and they like put all this stuff in his head and got him like all hyped up to do this like
or
thing,
the
and then
governor,
they arrest him for it.
What's her name? Whitmer, who was the kidnapping.
That's all. Yeah,
I was like 14 of the 16 people involved in the plot were FBI agents. The heck?
They're the strong majority. You're telling me they
like
couldn't thwart that?
This long history of like thwarted terrorist plots since 9/11, like bombs that have been stopped from going off by the FBI. But in almost every one of those cases, the FBI put the person up to them, put the person up to it, provided them with materials, even talked them into doing it, and then only to go and arrest them at the last second. Right? Like, just and then like say, hey, we thwarted a terror plot. So,
yeah.
If whether that's there was something like that going on, and then someone making a strategic decision to make a very public and purposeful flub of Secret Service procedures, those two things could combine to it still being a more conspiratorial assassination attempt without needing there to be multiple shooters.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need multiple shooters. I mean,
so I still haven't made up my mind either way, but I'm not going to let go of skepticism, and I'm tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to just take the freaking mainstream media's coverage as word, right, and gospel, because that's how you get duped.
No, I've been watching the congressional hearings with a lot of the people there that they're bringing forward as witnesses and testimony. It's been I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but I watched the beginning of it. The new Secret Service, the person who was right after Cheadle, they brought him in front of Congress, in front of a congressional hearing as well. So I haven't gotten into it much yet. But
I haven't yet either. But
I think he was kind of giving.
There's a handful of people I've elevated to like the people I'm following. Yeah, like they all, and I'm trying to choose people who have differing viewpoints on how it worked. Right. So like a balance of these people with their own sort of competing theories and the mainstream view, like is all a little bit of merging in my mind together.
Because I've been watching, you want people with different types of expertise. Like you want analysis from certain people who have the technical skill, and then you want
People who have
analysis from people who
the military
have
background,
and can analyze what happened on a military basis, like
Mm-hmm.
what. And even one guy I started following interviewed one of his buddies who was a former Secret Service agent
Mm-hmm.
back in 2008 is when he retired, like right after Obama is the person he was protecting. He like retired right after that or something, or during his anyway. And he was given like the lowdown on like what the procedures are, what they do, why they do it.
Right.
As far and not giving away secrets, but like telling as far as tactically why they do certain things. And but yeah, it was just a different point of view. You're not hearing it from just some dude on the street who has the who knows how to analyze footage.
The main consensus that has formed so far that pretty much everyone is covering is that the Secret Service just completely failed.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely
that's
failed.
bare minimum, I think.
Best case.
Right.
It's just them failing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just the coincidence of them failing so hard in such a way when an attempt was actually happening is crazy.
Well, and the fact that he had threats on his life, active threats from Iran, and
And
the
that
fact that
points
they could
to
do
someone
something like
relaxing
that.
security on purpose.
And there was all this questions about all the requests
Which is basically
they made
what
that were
the
denied.
former director admitted to. When she was asked if they upgraded his security in response to the threat, she said, "We assigned him," this is paraphrasing, she's like, "We assigned him
what was
the amount of security that we believed was proper
necessary.
and necessary." Right.
Yeah, so they took the request and changed a lot of the things they did end up giving them. And the former Secret Service person that I was talking about made a point that Trump's personal detail that's like with him on the daily, where some of them were there as part of the group that was, the suit and tie Secret Service agents, the actual bodyguards. He made a point that like in the case of like once he becomes a candidate instead of just a former president, they should have been swapped out with people who don't know him on a personal level, because of the fact that like after he was shot at, even though they say the person was down that made those shots, they don't know if there's anybody else yet, but the bodyguards stopped when Trump said, "Stop, wait, let me grab my shoes," and "Stop, wait, let me," and then he did his whole fist thing, and like, sure, that was iconic and cool and all
but
that,
they
but
shouldn't have
let him.
Those orders.
As soon as there's a threat, they take control of him.
Right.
They tackle him.
They're the ones
force
in
him
charge
in
at
the
that
car.
point.
Yeah, he's no longer giving them orders.
Right.
When it gets to that point, and the fact that they were stopping and I won't get into the fact that there was 3 females trying to cover his body, which they couldn't even cover up to his neck in some cases.
Which is probably a result of them being overly familiar with him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was the point that he made.
That's interesting.
So that's like another small failure. If there were multiple shooters, it's likely that at that point, that's when they would have taken their second shot, right?
Exactly.
It's when his head's exposed because there's this massive 2-foot gap between him and his protector, and and they're just stopping on the stage where he's like right in the open.
Right.
But yeah, I'm looking at all sorts of different views and seeing all the different failures, but Secret Service failed big time.
All right, so we are over. So let's go into
segment.
Yeah, Greg. Thanks again for another
legend, man.
Series of comments, because
you're a legend.
You gave us an entire segment.
Yeah, you're a legend, and you'll go down in infamy on this channel, on this podcast.
All right, cool. Well, let's take a break then. I've got a new artist added into our rotation of break songs. So this is an artist named TJ McNulty. You can find his music online on wherever streaming service. This is a song called Soul for Sale.
ocean personality. Given the way things are going, it would be a given if it didn't stop unraveling. Well, I have pity thoughts for believing. Well, hell, I pity thoughts of my own. It wouldn't be a given if it were given to me, but those are faults of my own. Well, I always wanted to speak so smoothly, like I was born with a tongue of glass. But I gave away the language given to me. Now it's just a story of my past. I heard of only men to admit to their fails, but sadly enough, I'm nothing but a boy with a soul for sale. I never think to stick my toes into cold water, 'cause I imagine those depths to swallow me whole. And I always listen to the lessons from my father, but I fail to make his morals my own. 'Cause I never thought to be scared of anything but everything. Well, now it scares the shit out of me. 'Cause I always wanted to be the one who was strong-headed, but I realize my strongholds are weak. Well, I would be a man to admit to my fails. Well, sadly enough, I'm nothing but a boy with a soul for sale.
TJ. That's a
Hell
good
yeah.
song.
I love that we're able to use all this music.
Yeah. So I used to run a recording studio, and these are all artists that we recorded. So I'm going to keep reaching out to the ones that we've worked with and see if I can get more and more people's permission to use their music.
It would be cool to have everybody's local artists, at least a lot of the local artists that you've worked with, and get their stuff on ours.
Yeah, well, because we're showing off local talent, and it's also stuff I at least had some sort of a hand in.
Yeah.
Whether it's just recording or just mixing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's cool.
Real quick, I'm going to run and grab a drink.
Oh, okay. Drew is approaching the refrigerator. He has opened the door. So Drew's going to go over the rest of the Robert Shoch talk first. And then we'll probably do the rest of the show with the talk I watched.
All right. So, I initially, when I first started going back, I was going to go over all the random Randall Carlson stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I got this clip, or not a clip, but I got this screenshot of this quote that he posted on the beginning of his talk. Just to kind of, it falls into play here.
Randall or Robert?
Randall Carlson. It was during his talk I got this quote from to start this whole thing off, but we're going to go over Robert Shoch's the rest of his presentation that I missed from the last episode. So yeah, in the beginning of Randall's, he goes over a quote by Will Durant, and it says, "Civilization exists by geological consent, subject to change without notice."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're freaking might as well be ants on the surface of the earth compared to geological processes.
Yeah, cosmic intervention or anything that might happen on a large scale like that. We are at the whims of the geological events.
Yeah, like
whether we can exist or not.
Do you see the Yellowstone eruption?
Yeah.
It wasn't a volcanic, but it was one of the geysers. It exploded. And I'm sure you guys have seen it. If not, go check it out. That shit is crazy.
There was a bunch of people walking right by it when it happened.
Luckily, no one was injured, but...
Yeah, but looking at the aftermath, it was pretty... I mean,
it was
that's
a lot
on a
of
small
damage.
scale.
It just so happened that no one was close enough to, like, get injured at the time it blew. But there was people within range that they had to run.
They had to run to get away from it,
Yeah.
But then when they went back and you see the videos and pictures of the aftermath, like everything's burned, everything's torched, all the walkways are, in ruins, basically, that they had built over that area. Yeah.
And we study this stuff, but, like, that doesn't
mean
necessarily
we have an
give us
idea of when
power
it's gonna happen.
to control it.
It just happens. It happens. I mean... I'm surprised you don't have to sign a waiver, or maybe you do when you go to Yellowstone.
I don't know. Yeah.
So what I talked about a lot with Robert Schoch stuff was mostly the weather patterns, the weathering, erosion on the Sphinx and the enclosure. And so that was his kind of like stepping stone into the past, right? Like understanding that civilization went back farther. That was kind of like his, realization of it.
Right.
And so he goes on to explore Göbekli Tepe when it's discovered, and like he goes with I don't know if he went with I know he went with John Anthony West to Göbekli Tepe to inspect the site. And he also went to, he talks about, what's his name? Klaus Schmidt.
Oh, yeah, Klaus Schmidt.
Schmidt's work
he's
on
the
it.
main archaeologist who ran Göbekli Tepe before he died.
So he, I don't know if he worked with him. It sounded a lot like he worked with him, but,
well, Schoch's not an archaeologist, so maybe he interviewed him, got to spend time with him, got him to like share his research.
Yeah. I mean, he might have just shared his research with them. So anyway, we'll start off with his original timeline that he, after seeing the Sphinx and dating stuff, so he's got this timeline that he's illustrated here. Can you? There you go. Go down to the bottom. I'm starting from the bottom and going up.
Okay.
So this chart here, my original timeline pushed the monument back to 5,000 to 7,000 BCE. This is where he put the Great Sphinx, right? So he's got the end of the Ice Age right there, 10,000 or 9,000 something years is the end.
Right.
And then he's got the Great Sphinx being built around 8,000 to, I don't know, what is that? 5,500 BCE. And then when he starts to look at Göbekli Tepe and he starts to reading some of the work on that and going and visiting the site, he has a lot of good pictures too that I took screenshots of. But he quotes this Stanford University archaeologist, Professor Dr. Ian Hodder, about Göbekli Tepe. It's unbelievably big and amazing at a ridiculously early date. Huge, great stones and fantastic, highly refined art. Many people think that it changes everything. It overturns the whole apple cart. All of our theories were wrong. And this is just kind of some of the shock, at least on the open-minded people.
Yeah.
Within archaeology.
Right.
And he's got, if you go up a little bit further,
notice he didn't say, well, I guess we need to re-examine the capabilities of hunter-gatherers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he said overturns the whole apple cart is what he's saying. He's not saying it throws a small wrench into the idea that we had of the Clovis people.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Before that, he does show a couple of headlines, you know, about the Sphinx that came out, about the big debate that scientists were going during that time frame when a lot of the evidence was coming out about the dating.
Right.
But he also kind of throws a little jab at Egyptologists as not being like scientists during this talk, which, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
if they're specific to
if
certain
Egyptologists,
and they're not being true to science,
right? If Egyptologists using standard Egyptological methods,
reference points too,
if they use whatever methods they use in Egyptology and they come up with a date for the Sphinx, and then a geologist comes along and says, no, the stone puts it at least here.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but if you're an Egyptologist using reference dating, using scribblings on essentially graffiti on monuments, using
which you can't date,
a pharaoh claiming that they you know, because they put their name on it,
right?
Like, if that's your source of dating, and then a geologist comes along using hard science to date it, I'm sorry, the geology trumps your other methods.
Yep. That's basically what he was saying, is he came in there, and like I mentioned on the last one, he said that he, within 30 to 120 seconds of seeing the site, he knew that it was water erosion.
Right.
And he knew that this happened over a long period of time.
Right.
And so back to Göbekli Tepe, he has some really cool pictures from when he went. And he showed the difference too of the site, because he's been there 3 separate times in early 90s, late 90s, and then like 2018 or 2019 or something like that, and all of the more recent construction going on there. Mm-hmm. He made a quick
he commented on the construction.
He just said that tarping it could create more moisture. In a sense, destroying it, but then also you have the rub of, you know, opening it up gives it, you know,
access for like water erosion and rain.
So either way, you're going to. So he doesn't.
It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
He's kind of like, I would prefer not to have tents over me.
Well, I don't think that area gets massive rainfall right now.
Probably not massive rainfall, no, but it probably does have some.
Of course, when the Brothers of the Serpent went out there, they went out there right after there was massive rainfall, and everything was green, and it's normally all yellow.
It's probably sporadic, but I mean, you probably do get great periods of like weeks of rain or something, you know, and then it goes away for months and months and months.
Right.
But yeah, so he made some remarks on that, and then he goes into where it's dated, and shows his timeline now. And you know, he talks about how some people
this is interesting. So he shows the Great Sphinx and its range, and how its range starts to overlap with the range that is possible for
the low end of Göbekli Tepe,
right? But the
high end of Göbekli Tepe goes back into the Ice Age,
exactly
before the end of the Ice Age. So if it was built before the end of the Ice Age, that means it was inhabited during the Ice Age and used for whatever purpose it was used for during the Ice Age. And then, you know, the traditional way over here on the right side of his chart here shows traditional understanding of the beginning of civilization back at 2500, 3000 BCE.
Yeah, a little before 3000 BCE.
Yeah.
Which, is essentially when we put the Mesopotamians.
Exactly. And it's still in this whole area, right? It's still in this area of even like what we were talking about before, the biblical stuff. I mean, this is Mesopotamia. This is like the
this is Bible
Crescent,
Central.
You know? Yeah. So
this is an interesting note he has on that image. It says, some say the area of biblical Eden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
right near Urfa.
Is crazy. Like, if the idea of Eden is actually talking about, like, these people living in the Göbekli Tepe established region.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh.
And especially they would be far enough north. No, I guess the ice sheet would be pretty far north from them. So.
Oh, yeah. That would still be.
But it would be in a pretty fertile area, right? It'd be all pretty fertile in that region at the time.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because of the big differentiating from
right.
the climate. But anyway, so yeah, that's the, some people say that is the biblical Eden area of the biblical Eden. So dating to Göbekli Tepe time, but uncovered in Urfa, which is what he was pointing to on this map below. Mm-hmm. During the construction project, indications of the substantial and very ancient remains under Urfa. So look at these statues found in Urfa, and they're dating to the same time period. And that looks exactly like what you would see on the pillar at Göbekli Tepe. Remember the stone that shows the arm wrapping around the belt area?
Yeah,
that's got the same kind of adornments. It's got the necklace looking thing. It's got the belt or something. So, looks like and that's him standing next to it for reference on height.
Right.
He's probably roughly 6 foot. And then, so then he goes into how some of the evidence and why it might have been buried. And he talks about how, like, burying it is not a small feat. And especially because a lot of people say it was rapidly buried and not just buried over time by, midden. Even though you might find midden, it doesn't mean that it was slow.
Someone may have, like, purposely excavated a midden heap somewhere in order to bury Göbekli Tepe.
And, he thinks that as much energy would have been spent burying it as it was to build the site.
Right.
And we're talking about 8,000 BCE. Like, you're talking about people that, as far as we can understand, they had no modern means of doing these things efficiently and fast or with minimal labor, right?
Well, they had to have. I'm sorry.
No, I know. I agree. But as far as
we covered the
thought,
Brothers of the Serpent talk, and, like, it's just...
Yeah. With all the scoop marks and all the different, like, that's pyramid stuff. But yeah. I mean, just the idea that they would spend this much time burying this means that there was some purpose. They knew something was going to happen, like a cataclysm that did happen. And there's even evidence that he talks about that the pillars were broken off during some sort of thing. Like they only partially buried it before the cataclysm could happen. And maybe after it, they, whoever may have, they finished burying
scenario it. Being this place is some sort of hub, some sort of city, right? Some sort of, like, important place with lots and lots of effort that went into it being made. A cataclysm happens. It breaks a bunch of the pillars. It knocks them down. And then after the cataclysm, after the people emerge, they stumble upon, or maybe they purposely go to the place and they're like, dude, this place is too important. We need to preserve it. They try and set it back up, and then they bury it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do their best to set it up to where they kind of roughly think it could go, puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
And then they bury it, thinking, let's preserve
clearly
this to show that we were technologically advanced at this time. At some
those
point.
People clearly didn't have the same level of technology as the people who built it.
Or everything was destroyed, right? So all of their stuff. So even if they did have the technology at one point and they're emerging from this cataclysm, they weren't going to have it anymore.
Right.
And they were like, this is an important site. Let's bury it. Let's try to do our best with what we got. Put some walls up, put some rocks there.
Interesting.
And then bury it. can't remember why I got that one, but he starts talking about the climate changing.
Oh, do you want to go into that video? You have video on here.
Oh yeah. Let's do that.
Which one of these?
The
evidence
other
for
one.
intentional burial?
Yep.
All right. So here's a little 1 minute clip from the talk that Drew clipped out.
But the crude blocks built right up against it, I don't believe for a second that they were carving these beautiful stone structures to simply the next day build crude walls against them. Some archaeologists have said, okay, that was intentionally buried, but that was part of their ritual. They would build this huge thing, put all this work into it, and then bury it as some kind of weird ritual. I think the evidence is there, in part because some of the pillars, and Klaus Schmidt noticed this too before he died, some of the pillars look like they've been used and reused because they actually show weathering on their surfaces that wouldn't have occurred once it was buried and protected. So Göbekli Tepe probably spanned several thousand years before the end of the last ice age when all is said and done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's saying it's likely it was around for thousands of years and had been, like, even some of these sites that we see, like Stonehenge and stuff, like, they don't, like, all these things could have gone back so much farther.
Right.
And even written or oral stories of them are seeing them in ruins after their actual prime, you know?
Yeah.
Like, these things all might go back before the Ice Age, before there was even access to this land. Maybe when all that land was accessible, when there was no ice before the Ice Age even, right? It's possible.
Yeah. Huh.
And then, so he starts talking about the climate change over the past 20,000 years.
This is an interesting chart here.
So the end of the last ice age, and then on the left side, you're seeing the temperature in Celsius. The right side is temperature in Fahrenheit. And then, so from the end of the last ice age...
Here's a bigger...
Oh, yeah, there we go. So, agriculture was established well after the warming, because there was like the little ice age there.
Yeah.
In Europe.
So the dramatic end of the last ice age there, right around that 12,000.
There was a big
or that
warming
11,600.
spike, and then it dropped back down into a cold plunge, and then it went way back up into the time frame when agriculture was established.
It's just too convenient that, like, right there at that moment, that's our first evidence of agriculture.
Especially because, like, if that's the case, you would think there would be a lot of evidence of them learning.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
The how rapid it seems to have been onset, you know, and maybe there's information that would change my mind, but I don't know. Seems weird. And then Mesopotamia flourishing, and then, you know, before the Little Ice Age, the Vikings were in Greenland and all that. I don't know what all that.
This is like logarithmic scale, because this third of the chart is covering 200 years, then this third is covering 2,000, and then this third is covering like 20,000.
Yeah, it's like zooming in as it goes.
Mm-hmm.
He has another one, another chart here from an article, Journal of Quaternary Science. Holocene warming marked by abrupt onset of the longer summers and reduced storm frequency around Greenland is the title of the paper. And then you see this chart showing the Holocene. So it's actually, you got to read this chart from right to left.
Right.
And then it doesn't actually say what it's showing, but I think I'm assuming that's temperature.
1678.1 0.18, 0.17. So whatever this is very minute changes. Yeah, these axes aren't labeled.
Anyway, so the end of the last ice age was marked by two major events. The final cold snap beginning 10,900 BCE, 12,900 years ago, or some suggest what was caused by a comet or meteor or asteroid. This has been questioned, and evidence is there, but it better fits a solar outburst model. And just for reference, he shows another chart after all of his evidence showing Göbekli Tepe, Great Sphinx, and then end of the Ice Age there before 10,000 BCE. So 12,000 years ago. And he's putting Göbekli Tepe and the Great Sphinx behind them at, 10,000 BCE. So...
Right. So does he talk about why he adjusted the Great Sphinx further back in time, or he's just like projecting that maybe that was there?
I think that's like the high end of its range. Okay. Is like to the end of the Ice Age. So I think he's basically saying no matter how close that water happened to the end of the Ice Age, it was around before the end of the Ice Age. That's what I think he's been trying to say. The final warming, very sudden, occurs at 9,700 BCE or 11,700 years ago. This is what brought the last ice age to an end, but what caused it? So then he starts to talk about how the craters haven't panned out. They haven't found anything to suggest that there was an actual comet hit, like the one that impacted Greenland. And that we recently discovered.
That left a big crater, even though it hit a glacier.
Yes, but they're dating it at like 52 million years ago.
Right. That's the Hiawatha crater. Yeah,
and this example is showing that even though a comet hit the glacier that was on North America during the Ice Age, it would have left a crater or some sort of clue. Especially that recently in our history compared to like a 52. I mean,
the only hole in that is he's making the assumption that the comet is striking the ground
instead of an airburst, right?
Because if it's an airburst, it could release tons of energy without actually hitting the ground.
Yes, and he concedes that it's still plausible, right? Like he concedes that it's still plausible, and he hasn't like proven the fact that it was a solar outburst, but what he's saying is the evidence fits better is what he thinks.
Right.
And he goes on to say that the Carolina Bays, as far as a lot of the geologists who have studied them, he's saying that there's hundreds of thousands of years of difference in the samples that they're collecting from some of these. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for it to all be coming from one event.
Yeah.
At least not all of them in a large scale.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the Carolina Bays is the Comet Research Group specifically doesn't include it in their body of evidence for the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis because it's not their strongest evidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for them, it's just a cool
theory.
Yeah,
cool
like a side thing that could tie into it.
Sure.
But
if they were to get sufficient evidence.
Right.
I've seen a lot of fluctuations in the data from the Carolina Bays. So. And then he goes on to say the sun is so he has a little quote here. The science now points to the sun. The sun sometimes quiet, sometimes not. Pull these up. So, as we've seen recently, the sun is not as stable as most people believe. The end of the last ice age, circa 9700 BCE, brought about a massive solar event or closely connected series of solar events. Sometimes the sun undergoes major solar outbursts, ejecting powerful plasma discharges. Electrically charged particles is what plasma is towards Earth. Such plasma outbursts would cause massive destruction on Earth and dramatically warm the climate, melting glaciers and ending an ice age. Greenland ice core data So Greenland ice core data, sediment core data, and moon data all indicate that 9700 BCE warming was virtually instantaneous, and the sun was extremely active at the time.
Moon data.
So yeah, he talks a bit about the moon data. So this is a graphic showing what it would look for. It's not to scale, obviously, but showing what it might look like, a plume of cosmic solar energetic particles coming off the sun, hitting our magnetic sphere, or our magnetosphere, and warping it, and then a lot of it being coming in through our poles and spreading out because of the less protection from our magnetosphere. In the case of the big solar outbursts, the Earth's magnetic field could clearly not hold up to an incoming gas, was what they called it before they knew it was plasma. Plasma charged particles, and it would indeed drive down the atmospheric level. It would take the form of a series of sparks, burning for extended periods of time and carrying currents of hundreds of millions of amperes, causing massive destruction on the surface of the planet. And so they say, look for vitrification. This is from astrophysicist Thomas Gold from Cornell University. And then so he talks a bit about Apollo 11 and how...
I would just want to pause on the vitrification point because we do see that in Egypt. There's a bunch of the stones there that... One of the weird things about Egypt is when you go into like the really ancient period where they're building the super precise, super megalithic temples and pyramids and such, a lot of those sites look like they are just blown apart.
Yeah.
Like these are giant columns that are like they're tossed from their original place.
Not just like crumbled.
Right. Like, and you would think if people were moving them because they were quarrying them for reuse or something, that they would like set them in a like sensible position to be worked and stuff. But like, this is shit that got like, toppled. Yeah. And a lot of those stones show vitrification. They show like damage, like the texture of the stone is wrong. Like, it's not like the rest of the clean limestone and granite that you can see elsewhere. Like there's this weird, like rough eaten into texture on the outside.
Yeah, and we'll see some examples of it. So that's what they're finding on the moon. So the Apollo 11 observations of a remarkable glazing or vitrification phenomenon on the lunar surface. The abstract says some glazing is apparent due to radiation heating. It suggests a giant solar outburst in geologically recent times.
Yeah, because the moon doesn't have a magnetic field. And it, I believe, for most of its orbit, sits outside of ours, right? Like when the moon is on the opposite side of the sun from us, like I believe the solar wind pushing our magnetic field at it, like it would sit inside of that tail of the magnetic field, but not when it's on the other side.
It would get the brunt.
Not when it's on either side.
Yeah, it would get just as much.
Yeah, so it would have no different pattern, magnetic protection. So it would, in theory, get hit harder than the Earth would.
So I'd have to zoom in really to see the caption on that picture, but
here, let me do that.
I think it zooms in for us here. So this is Source Science, new series, volume 165, blah, 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 published by American Association for the Advancement of Science.
Okay.
And so he goes on to talk about, so let's do video 2 real quick.
Okay.
He actually talks a bit about it.
Video 2 coming up.
data, and he published as far back as 1969, based on the early Apollo missions to the moon, that he found what he called some glazing, vitrification that is apparently due to radiation heating. It suggests a giant solar outburst, I'm quoting him, in geologically recent times. Geologically recent times being translated into our language, end of the last ice age. And so there's photographs of it because it's preserved on the moon, and he could find it because, you don't have the same weathering conditions.
Yeah. Right. They don't have the same weathering conditions. They don't have the same like sedimentary buildup, other than like when a meteor hits, then it puffs up a plume of material that will then rain back down. So you'll slowly get some sediment build up over time,
but
sporadically.
There's no wind pushing things around.
Right. There's no atmosphere constantly moving water, and there's no wind pushing. Yeah.
So it would be preserved in the fact that there's just nothing to cover it up, no erosion, nothing going on to change it. So
yeah.
I've got a little bit more. But let's take a break.
Yeah, we're over.
Let's take a little break. Come back. We'll finish up a little bit, and yeah, we might be able to finish up with just this and keep yours for
maybe
next episode. I've got some cool stuff to talk about.
Let's not rush through this.
Yeah, we got some cool, some more slides to show you
for sure. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back.
Yo. All right.
I wanted you to start freestyling. You got me all hyped up for nothing.
All right, here we go now. Gonna talk about the electric universe now. So, yeah. We left off talking about the vitrification.
Robert Schoch would be appalled with you calling him an electric universe guy.
I think he's more of an electric universe guy than he realizes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about, what about periods? So let's go with electric universe real quick, right?
Okay.
Like lightning bolts traveling between planets and shit, right? You've heard this theory where like there's like a Grand Canyon structure on Mars that it like dwarfs our Grand Canyon, and even our own Grand Canyon some people who look at it and analyze the shape and the structure say that it's more consistent with pathways that lightning takes through, like when lightning strikes the ground, you like dig up the thing. Mm-hmm. It's more consistent with like lightning style shapes than it is with like water erosion shapes. In some people's opinion. I'm not a geologist. I can't like
fully speak to that.
Yeah.
I saw some of the images and it was pretty compelling. I've seen that same theory of like the Grand Canyon having been like, especially when they show you side by side. I can't remember what video I was watching. Maybe it was a Y-Files episode on the Electric Universe that I was watching. He did a pretty good job of showing the side by side footage of like an electric current going through an object.
Yeah.
And then showing the Grand Canyon on a zoomed out, you know. So you're seeing the pattern.
There's also the tie-ins with like say ancient Greek mythology where like their planets are all gods and they have names.
Right.
And like Zeus throws the lightning bolt. And Mars is the god of war and stuff like that. But
shows you the connection between them.
It's harder to make sense of that theory when you think of the sun as stable.
Right.
Now that Robert Schoch is opening up the sun as way more active and violent at times, that opens up the possibility. I mean, if the sun is already sending this highly charged plasma through the solar system, then it's a little less incredible that an arc of energy, of directed charge could possibly travel from planet to planet.
Right. And even if it's not like fully like electric, like it doesn't, like we got to understand the scale of these things too, right? So like what we would see might not be what we would see from our perspective of lightning we see here on Earth, right? So if we were seeing a massive amount of energy moving through the solar system, it might be that it's hitting multiple planets at a time, like that it's a wave even.
Yeah. And imagine if you live in an era where the sun is more active.
Right.
And you see a lot more aurora. The sky is more active.
There's less lights polluting, probably.
Maybe you get these weird light shows with the planets themselves.
Don't get too far ahead of me here.
Oh, okay.
Because I want to talk a bit about the light forms that may have been seen.
Oh, right. I forgot
then.
This is part of his stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
right. I'm really glad you watched the rest of this.
Me
is
too.
Great talk.
Me too. So after they found after he shows the evidence of vitrification on the moon surface, he talks about some of the stuff we're seeing here on Earth from lightning strikes. The vitrification on Earth here from the Libyan desert. This is the Libyan desert glass. Approximately 2,500 square kilometers strewn field. Not exactly sure what that means. Anyway,
probably a field,
like a strewn field. Okay, yeah,
where things are strewn about.
Yeah. Okay, yep.
So 2,500 square kilometer strewn field. That's a big, massive area
of where they're finding this Libyan desert glass.
Right.
And then this is the Dakhla glass from Western Desert in Egypt. This is obviously sand, right? Being hit by lightning. So here, so the supposed indicators of an impact or comet event can be caused by lightning and plasma strikes as well. So this is the header and maybe a quote from the article from Scholar Commons, University of South Florida. A graduate thesis and dissertation, a geochemical analysis of fulgurites from the inner glass of the outer crust. Several glasses of unknown origin have been referenced recently as meteorite impacts or meteorite burst induced. The Dakle and putative impact glass characteristics are all observed within the 11 fulgurite samples examined in this study, and suggest that the Dakle and other desert glasses of unknown origins need to be reevaluated.
Huh. Right.
So this is somebody who's going out there and doing a geochemical analysis on these things and saying that
it's analysis of fulgurites. My understanding is the term fulgurite means the thing that is left when a lightning strike. Maybe that also applies to the melt glass structures.
Well, I think they're finding those melt glasses and stuff within that.
Well, I mean, the melt glass structures from a comet or a meteor strike.
Well, they're finding it in sediment.
If those things are vitrified, like, is that also called a fulgurite? Because it's melting rock versus a lightning strike, and it's melting sand or rock also being a fulgurite. But, like, the lightning one would have distinct characteristics from a meteor impact. Like, have you seen...
Not all of them, because, I mean, you're talking about a high-intensity heat something. So and we're talking about from the comets, you're talking about a radioactive, like, melting of these elements that creates these...
Here we go. Perplexity AI. Fulgurite is natural glass formation created when lightning strikes the ground, typically in areas with quartzose sand, silica, or soil. The intense heat from the lightning, which can exceed 1800 degrees Celsius, melts and fuses the mineral grains together, forming hollow tube-like structures known as fulgurites. These structures are often referred to as petrified lightning due to their origin and appearance.
Yeah, because, like, the structures are all different. So a lot of the times you're finding, like, depending on the type of medium that you're finding it in, you're finding different structures that these are creating.
So I'm asking if the comet impact formations are also called fulgurites. Yeah, they're just called, like, impact melt glasses.
So fulgurites are specifically caused by lightning strikes.
Right. Okay. So, revisiting this, several glasses of unknown origins referenced recently as meteorite impact. Okay, I see. Or meteorite burst induced. Impact glass characteristics are all observed within the 11 fulgurite samples. So there's like a weird mixture of terminology here, but I think what they're trying to say is that because he's using dots, he's doing some editorial stuff here. So what they might be saying is that the glasses that they thought were from meteor impacts actually are shown to have more fulgurite properties.
Right. So I think what he's saying is that the evidence that shows that it was an impact or comet event could also be explained by
this is just a paper
event.
Talking about fulgurites and how they're so similar to comet events. I see. Got it.
He has another one, Geophysical Research Letters, Generation of Shoch, lamellae, and melting. Lamellae, I don't know how to say that. Lamellae. And melting in rocks by lightning-induced shock waves and electrical heating. So this is another one of the supposed indicators of an impact and comet event that can also be caused by lightning and plasma strikes. That's what they're saying. So the melting in the rocks by lightning-induced shock waves. And
Lamellae are thin plate-like structures or layers found in various biological or non-biological contexts.
So it's the counterpart to fulgurites in
Plate-like, or they're layers.
In biological stuff, though.
Well, and geological, I think it was saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then he goes on to talk about how even the Sphinx has a history of being struck by lightning or plasma. And they found evidence of lightning strikes there.
Okay.
And
which makes sense. Yeah.
There's a inventory stela statue states that the Great Sphinx was hit by a thunderbolt. The temple of Isis in the shadow of the Great Pyramid had a stele that stated that. It says, if we could believe its inscriptions, we should have to credit Khufu with having repaired the Sphinx, apparently after it had been damaged by the thunderbolt. As a matter of fact, there may have been a grain of truth in this story. For the tail of the Nemes headdress is certainly missing. There is actually to be seen on the back of the Sphinx the scar of the breakage. Therefore, it is perhaps likely that the Sphinx was struck by lightning, but there is not a particular evidence to show that this accident happened in the reign of Khufu.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Not a particle of evidence. Okay, so there's nothing showing that the strike happened in Khufu's time, but there's evidence that Khufu was like, hey, I'm going to fix this.
Mm-hmm. Like maybe it was his political
and maybe that's
point.
When, to Graham's theory, when if it was a lion got recarved into the shape of a human, maybe that wasn't just to deface what was originally there, but it was like an attempt at repairing the lightning damage.
Yeah, doing it the way they could to
especially because if the lightning's going to strike, you would assume it's going to strike the highest area, and the highest area is going to be the head. And if the head was larger, actually proportional to the body, and was a lion, then whatever damage, you could remove that and turn it into something else.
Yep, something smaller. That's why the head is seen as unproportional. So now we get into some of the talks about the plasma and how it was seen in the sky.
Yeah.
And how the form of it, when they look at it, it shows to them now. So Dr. Peratt has demonstrated that ancient petroglyphs or rock art found all over the world are indicative of exceptional plasma formations in the ancient skies caused by our sun. Think of the northern lights and southern lights, but much more intense, forming stick figures. He and his colleagues have documented examples from over 130 countries. So these are the graphic illustrations of a plasma discharge formation.
Dude, if you have not seen these before, Graham talks about these too.
So then he shows these stick figures, men with dots on the sides, and stick figure men with bird heads or bird men, cascading donut-like cylindrical shapes. These are all cave paintings and stuff. And then it shows on the right side the Peratt plasma, pinch instabilities. That's what those look like. And then the Peratt plasma in different forms: simulation, experiment, conceptual geometry. So these are those tubular like formations.
Right.
These are images from Dr. Peratt. And then you go up and you start to see all these different figures that are seen in cave paintings all over the world.
Which is like converting them into more anthropomorphized shapes, which, like, if you look at the actual plasma forms, like, how could you not see stick figures?
Right.
And if there's those in the sky, like, that's the gods coming to visit you, man.
Yeah. Especially like we outlined how the ancients may have looked at the world when they when they have these type of views on how the, these secret ritual or secret colleges, basically,
Yeah. Wow.
You see this in the sky, and you're just taken aback by.
Is that Nazca, or is that just something Nazca like?
What do you mean?
This photo here?
Oh. I don't know, but the one on the right is from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
It didn't have a label, I guess. Or maybe I'm covering it.
Dang, that's cool. Here's some more examples from Ausvik, Norway.
Yep.
Wow.
And then there's these Stella or something that his wife, Katie, noticed on the Rongorongo, that the Rongorongo characters look like Dr. Parat's plasma petroglyphs. I guess that's what they call those figures. The Rongorongo.
No, the Rongorongo is a specific language. Rongorongo.
Oh, got it. Yeah. So she found a lot of those stick figures within that on the petroglyphs found around the world as well.
Those do kind of look like plasma forms. Wow. I love this.
Yeah, I mean, if the sun is more active and this is what the type of formations with the high volume plasma discharge would you would see coming in.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it doesn't have to be either or either, because here's another thing to think about. If the sun is sending out these like powerful bursts, those things could knock some shit in the asteroid belt loose out of their normal trajectory.
Sure.
And then that could ultimately lead to more comets and meteors falling in.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, and so there is some debate on whether the onset of the Younger Dryas or the end of the Ice Age were two different events, and maybe one of them or both of them, maybe one of them was a comet and one of them was a solar event. Yeah. Solar event may have triggered a lot of asteroidal activity. You might have got an air burst. I think and a big enough one came and hit.
I think they would travel together in a certain sense, like I heard a little bit of one of Randall's older talks recently, and he was talking about how it's starting to look more and more like catastrophe is just a thing that happens all the time. Like where Earth's history is polka dotted with catastrophes all over the place, no matter how far back you go. And that the longest period without a catastrophe in a very long time is actually the period we're living in right now.
Which means we're due.
Yeah. This is not the norm, is what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, to be in such a time where there's so little activity.
Right.
Based on the evidence.
Huh.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So what's this one here?
So I believe this is, so the time in years correlates with the color you're seeing there. And
those look like peoples.
So Celtic, these is supposedly the emergence Germanic. Of the major branches of the subsequent diversification.
Oh, okay. Oh, and then time years ago for when they originated.
Yeah, so you get the oldest back, you get the Anatolian, and then you get the
Anatolian branches off early.
Armenian, Greek, Albanian, Indo-Iranian, Balto-Slavic, Germanic, Italic, and Celtic.
Right, so
kind of as they kind of pop up through time.
Celtic and Italic branched off from each other pretty recently, is what it's showing. And then Celtic and Italic come from a branch, which is the same branch that Germanic comes from.
Right. So, I don't know.
So this is sort of showing
what that was. Maybe that was a...
This is showing human movements through time, right? So what this is showing you is that Anatolian was one of the earliest to branch off, okay? And look at where they're centered. Right
right in the Mesopotamia, right in the
Eastern Mediterranean,
right
like
above
Turkey, above Mesopotamia, like that chunk of land.
And that goes way back to 8,000 years.
Yeah. And then from there, people start spreading out.
Yeah. Especially once the ice recedes, when
I'd like to see this chart go further. I would like to see a chart like this for all the races, though. But this is sort of showing like European and West Asian
migration in a sense.
Interesting.
So he also shows some evidence on this sculpture. So this is supposedly a pharaoh, and this shows that he's a bird, like the bird on the back of his head, symbolizing the lion chair that he sits in, representing the sun. The chair indicates being carried, cascading rings in the solar plasma, and the plasma torus supports it all. So you see the chair is like
this got plasma some of those plasma forms on the side of the chair.
And the bird-headed man being referenced, I think up here says it. The ancient statue is a symphony in stone stating, "We become the sun stars." So the bird man equals eternal life. Is what he's supposing the translation of this is.
Dude, think about this. Like, as I'm starting to get deeper and deeper and deeper in these topics, and as we go into like secret history, and you look at ancient Egyptian, and like we're at this weird point where we're really close to like science interacting with like the spiritual and the supernatural, quote unquote, phenomena. But imagine on the other side of that, right? Like, so imagine science proves that some of this quote unquote supernatural phenomena is real. Imagine we prove that reincarnation is real and the soul exists. Okay. Now fast forward yourself into that world. Okay. You hop in a time machine, you travel forward 100 years where science has combined mysticism with science, and now we're scientifically studying the mystical. What is society going to look like when that is the norm?
It's going to be altered greatly for sure.
Right.
And which direction is dependent on the type of release of the information, right? Like you could see
let's say it's widely known.
George Orwell.
Let's say it's widely known and studied.
Yeah, okay.
Now, we're in that time zone, okay? We're in the future, 200 years, whatever, in the future.
Yeah.
We know that this stuff is real. We are able to scientifically study it. We're going to unlock the secrets of gravity, the secrets of traveling with astral projection, the secrets of like communicating with our ancestors and communicating with them about what life is like.
Into the understanding that life does not end, reincarnation is real. You have access to the information at all times. You just have to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
Like then you got people who are born into this world like we talked about before, where kids are so molded by the world they're brought up in. Like kids, obviously the generations years and years and years into it would be more adept than the creators of the, or the inception.
And might we as those people 200 years from now have the ability to manipulate stone as if it's butter, lift things with our anti-gravity tech and drop, and stop building things out of metal and wood and start building things out of giant stone blocks of stone because it lasts forever. Yeah. Obviously not necessarily for like a individual family dwelling, but like if you're going to build a school, a university, a scientific institution, a monument, right? Yeah. Like you're going to use those
electrical generating power plant.
So might we 200 years in that alternative future, might we now be the ones that are building with megalithic stone? Mm-hmm. Might we be carving on that stone all this shit we're learning by taking hallucinogens and talking to the spirits? Or might there be spiritual schools, temples built where people go to be immersed and trained on how to speak spirit language and be initiated, and then go 10,000 more years in the future
when a
cataclysm has happened. And what are the people going to dig up? They're going to dig up the stone monuments that have survived.
That's all that's going to be left.
Everything we built out of wood and metal is gone. The big monuments, the carvings, that's what they're going to find.
Yep. Absolutely. And
so maybe these people actually were the people who survived from these crazy polytheistic religions is actually them trying to document their traversal of the spirit realm, their interaction with UFOs and gods and aliens.
Absolutely. Yeah. And eventually it gets to a point where they have to survive. So they're slowly bred out. Like those abilities would be slowly bred out of you into just survival instincts to maintain the population if after a cataclysm, right? Mm. And then you'd go back to hunter-gatherers to further generations, just like we talked about. Kids grow up, and so the same kids that would have flourished in an advanced civilization are now having to survive on a savanna.
Right. And they're doing the best they can, like that. So agriculture is going to pop up right away, but they're going to do what they know. Yep. Like if I had to survive, I'm going to be like, all right, let me gather seeds. Let me start domesticating. Like you're probably setting up, like maybe you're going and finding wild plants that you know are edible and re-domesticating those plants. And so even an archaeologist of 20,000 years from now will be like, oh, this is when they domesticated wheat. But really, that's when we domesticated wheat again.
Yeah.
And you see us developing it because we know how to hybridize. We know how to selective breed. We can't use our science anymore and like manipulate the DNA like we used to, but we know how to selective breed. Yeah. Like certain things that are more like folk knowledge, easier for everyone to understand. Those are going to be the things that move into the future and help us get a kickstart. But no one can really understand like why
they were talking about it in this way, how they knew.
Right. Yeah. And maybe they have stories of people from the past who were like gods to them, who had all these abilities of those things.
They had mastery of it, and maybe they stuck around for as long as they could. Right, the society they came from diminished, but few survivors stayed around, and they survived with the people who were living off the land, like we are experiencing today. Right. We have people living in giant cities like Tokyo and New York City, and like all these people. And then at the same time, we have people hunting and gathering to survive on the same planet at the same time period.
Right.
Why do we think that's not possible for a civilization back in the time, before a cataclysm, where you had people living in an advanced way with advanced societies, and you had people living off the land at the same time?
If cataclysm truly is the norm, right, it would be... If it's something that happens all the time, like at least like periodically, at least on the thousands of years level of time, like, or tens of thousands of years level of time, like we're going to build back up where we can, and dude,
and we don't even know if time is a loop. We don't even know. We have no answers. We don't know that our time doesn't eventually go back to our past. eventually we get to a point where our future looks exactly like our past, and the Earth changes so much.
Well, we
And
know
back
the
to
Earth is cyclic, and almost all natural processes are cyclic. And why couldn't the sun be cyclic as far as its periods of activity? We already know it is with the 11-year solar cycles, but what if those are just like regular perturbations in like longer waveforms, you know?
Yeah, and back to your point about the seeds and being like refiguring out agriculture. We're talking about thousands of years between, and even Flint Dibble admits in his debate with Graham Hancock that a domesticated plant can become become feral again, and it takes thousands of years. But if you have thousands of years, and then it's feasible that what you would not see the evidence for it up until the point where you see the evidence for it. And so the idea that it's not possible that thousands of years before, when you're seeing agriculture, there wasn't agriculture.
Well, and
especially when you're talking about a cataclysmic time period.
I think we could tease apart all of these theories scientifically, especially the DNA evidence of domestication. But we would have to probably have samples going all the way back to before humanoids were artificially interrupting the environment, right? Because now we also know that, like, with Neanderthals and Denisovans and all of this, bipeds with brain cavity sizes that are sufficient to host intelligence go way further back than the quote unquote 200,000 years of modern humans.
Right.
And so what if
they were actually smarter than we think?
Well, if you can go back before those people were messing with the environment, breeding plants, and you can get enough plant samples, and then you bring that forward, you probably could scientifically, with enough data, track a domestication event and then a rewilding an event back to a new domestication. I think it's got to be. I think it's just got to be a matter of massive data and like wide global sampling going back at like regular intervals, millions of years.
Yeah, which seems impossible because it would truly have to be global. You can
it's just going to be a matter of time, right? Like one day, once we have like robots and AI, and we can send out an army of self-replicating drones to sample everything, you know, going back tens of thousands of years. You know, once it's not paying, you know, human salaries for every pick in the sand and every shovel, like we can make better progress quicker. And then the raw data can speak for itself.
And then we have quantum computers that can sift through all the data. Yeah.
Or before all that happens, we get hit again
by another cataclysm. Cheers. I don't know.
But cool.
I mean, there are some scary things.
Oh, that's the end of it too.
That's the end of it.
Realize.
And we ripped off that pretty good. What are we at time wise?
We're pretty close to the end here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're basically done.
Cool,
dude.
This topic is fascinating. I really love the reference to the plasma formations in contrast to these cave paintings and etches and stuff they're finding all over the world. It looks pretty compelling.
Well, dude, my mind is still going off with this. Like, if cataclysm is and hominids are intelligent, go way back, like maybe whatever was the first intelligent hominid was not us. The first hominid that created civilization was not us. It was different species, but like from the same family tree, right?
Still a hominid or whatever.
And then some sort of cataclysm happens, right? Like we spread, we have a civilization, cataclysm happens. Not us, but like the proto-hominid, right? The first civilization. Cataclysm happens, technology gets wiped back because they hadn't seen one yet. They were the first ones. They didn't necessarily know, right? That hominid gets isolated all over the world. They start to sub-adapt in the new climates. They speciate and become different forms of hominids. Then as the earth shifts and Pangea breaks apart and all this, and then they start traveling the world and interacting with each other, maybe wars. Like now there's all these different like different types of hominids. The world looks a lot more like the Lord of the Rings world where there's giants and hobbits and normal sized people.
All these different things going on.
And
dragons.
Maybe. And then another cataclysm happens. And every time it happens, things shake out in a new order. Some people survive. Sometimes technology is high enough that we can get off the Earth onto Mars, onto the moon.
Right.
Those people are isolated there and are surviving. They start looking totally different. Maybe like gray aliens. They come back and visit, pull resources, and resupply their moon base.
Right.
While us here, like, what the heck are these people coming and going? They come down and then they try and organize us in a way to like make us productive for them. Maybe like mining a bunch of gold because they find it useful for their industry on the moon because they don't have as much gold up there or whatever. Right? You know?
Yeah. Well, even if you think about the Anunnaki and like that whole idea too, like that, the idea that Nibiru, this planet X or whatever, that's way out, that eventually will come into our orbit, you know, they're predicting. Like, if that's true, and maybe at some point either if they also have life and it's from Earth, or they are the ones who brought life here, we are the ones who left there because of some cataclysm to reform here. Like that could, like, there's so many possibilities when you bring into the idea, like you're talking, like the idea of moving forward a couple hundred years where we find truth in a lot of this phenomenon.
Right.
Like,
and it's all hinged on like, what if all this spiritual stuff is true, right? Like,
and especially if we are, cataclysm is the norm, right?
Right.
And that's just a cyclical thing. And if humans or humanoids can survive, and maybe we're the last because there's no other humanoids here.
Right. We're the last.
We're the last of the entire.
There's been maybe like the rhythm of the cataclysms at a certain point hit too frequently, like the onset and then the offset of the Younger Dryas. That's only 1,200 years apart. So maybe they saw some shit coming. They tried to survive. Then they come back out. They're trying to reestablish, and then they get hit again, but they weren't ready for the second hit, right? And then it really cripples us. Most of the other species are gone. It's just Homo sapiens now. We have no connection to the knowledge from before left because we didn't expect to get hit again within 1,200 years. Right. So we were setting up to re-educate everyone with like Göbekli Tepe and stuff, and we were rebuilding. All of a sudden we get hit again. So the best they can come up with is, hey, we're not ready to survive. Let's go bury this stuff for later in the future, them to dig up, repiece it together.
And maybe they'll just continue to cycle.
And that's why Göbekli Tepe was buried, everyone. So you're welcome for the genius theory.
I was gonna say, we need to animate that. We need to get somebody to animate your rant into an entire like 3D.
Dude, it makes a kind of weird, like awkward sense, right? Like
it does. It does. Like, it's obviously allowing for a lot. Like, you got to allow a lot of things to be true. But I think it's a great way to
it's
put
interesting,
it all
like
together.
Hybridizing all these different topics we're into, and if
it's
pretty
a simulation,
short-sighted.
You made this yourself for yourself, and you're experiencing this because you wanted to. It's a game.
Yeah, it's also pretty small fry because it doesn't take into account like galactic scale.
Right.
It doesn't really take into account like what's actually happening on the other side with the spirits and like the creator of the universe
and quantumly. Like,
right.
We don't know
so
what's
like
going
there's
on,
a lot more
layers
aspects
to it.
that would like, if this was true, would have huge implications and could offset it a whole lot. Yeah. But something akin to it anyway. Not saying I believe it, just It's a fun,
Very fun thought.
I love trying to put stuff together.
Experiment.
I'm looking for the grand theory.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially something that ties all of it together, not just the stuff we have proven.
Right. And maybe like the whole reptilian stuff and the whole like Anunnaki or blue bloods, like modern conspiracy of like royal elite families ordained by God to rule everyone and like the bloodlines that pass down. Like maybe there actually was one of the other species that survived, but in such small numbers.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're the frail little grays who can barely move shit and they need people like us to do their dirty work for them, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's the same idea with the...
And so they rule from the shadows.
Yeah, it's the same idea of like the 12th planet stuff too, right?
Yeah.
The idea that Enki and Enlil and them using what's the name of the race of humanoids that they enslaved to mine gold? Adamu.
Yeah.
No, is it Adamu?
Oh, you the ones before humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we before
I forget
we
what they were called.
Because they bred them with us, or with
they bred themselves
ancestors.
With whatever, like
whatever
this
chimp-like
whatever the
creature.
The Zechariah sort of conspiracy.
Yeah.
Explanation of it, not like what
not the
what
actual
scholars will say that they said, but I believe that story goes that they already had a race that was doing the work for them, but that race rebelled
against them,
and then the Anunnaki decided to create a new race.
Yep.
And that was us.
Basically freed the slave, the race that they had been enslaved, because they were part of some war on their home planet or something.
Right.
They lost and they became the enslaved race or whatever.
Yeah.
And they brought them here to Earth to mine gold, to save their to put into their atmosphere, to save their planet from a solar event or something.
Right.
Which again, ties
and when
in.
you combine into this like the Chandra-Wickramasinga, panspermia type ideas, and like, you know, maybe
it's not so far-fetched.
Maybe once we unlock like anti-gravity easy space travel,
we'll be able to
we have in the past colonized a bunch of nearby planets
and lost contact with them,
but they didn't lose contact with us. They know to come here to gather resources. And maybe
over time,
we had a closer relationship at some point in the past, but with all the cataclysms and the wipeouts, now it's just these freaking Homo sapiens
and they've
left.
changed.
And they're like, well, we're not going to teach them everything all over again because we have a history with them, and they don't always, you know, they're kind of warlike. They might try and mess with us. So instead, let's control them. Let's get the resources we need out of them by setting up, you know, organized society, big state structures. This is where the libertarianism comes in. Like these big state structures where they constantly pull resources out of us through taxation.
Or if you believe in the lizard people, they're feeding off our pain and suffering.
Yeah. I think it's more about the resources, to be honest.
Hey,
they set us up. They set up a clever economic system where, unless you're economically educated, you don't realize how we're all being exploited all the time. You just think, oh, this is how we just pay this stuff to pave our roads. No, we are constantly being siphoned off resources by a ruling elite,
a show of
who
force.
Sees themselves differently than us.
But it's all under the guise of these are going into a machine of, you know.
Yeah. And they set up a ruling crust layer of humans that they don favors on because they, looking like humans, they're the ones that push the lie to us and control our societies.
Dude, you know what's funny? That perfect segue into something that we could finish with.
What's that?
This theory, this conspiracy theory that the Trumps are time travelers.
Ooh, I like this.
And it's basically it begins with the fact that John G. Trump was the FBI, one of the FBI agents that raided Nikola Tesla's apartment or his home where all of his
I've heard
research
a little bit
was.
of this. Yeah, keep going.
And he basically found and took personally evident or research about warping time, and that over a period of time he got his own researchers or scientists to create a time machine.
Well,
and he uses it within his family, and that there's a weird connection where there's this book published in 1896, and it's called Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Adventure or something like that. And it's about a guy named Baron Trump time traveling, and Baron Trump is Donald Trump's son.
Whoa. All right, so to build on that, if we go back to episode 29, where we were talking about Paul Schotzkin and the Back to the Future, talking the anti-gravity stuff, if you recall, and if you like are into like physics and Einstein and relativity and all that shit, if you develop anti-gravity tech, you have also developed time travel tech.
Yeah.
Because space-time, you're manipulating, but in order to manipulate space in such a way that you can defy the speed of light, you're also creating time vortexes and bubbles that can travel you through time.
So
those technologies are two sides of the same coin, because space-time is the same thing. Space and time are part of the same thing. So if you're distorting space, you are distorting time.
I could see it. I could see the Trumps being time travel. Dude, it's funny, the cover on the book of look it up real quick. The cover on the book of Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Adventure or something like that. The face of the character of Baron Trump on the cover looks, and you do a side by side of Baron Trump's head. Yeah, that one.
This one?
Yep. So the face of the boy that's supposedly that is the character. I started reading the book, and that is the character of Baron Trump. And then now look up a picture of like Baron Trump in his teenage years,
like real historical Baron Trump.
Baron Trump, Donald Trump's son.
God damn. Donald Trump's youngest.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
So there's better images of like a close up of just him too.
Yeah,
but you look at like the facial structure and stuff, and like the pretty pronounced eyes and stuff, and like the little bit of.
Do they please tell me they have a dog that looks like this?
I don't know, but that would be insane. That would be insane,
dude. Yeah, well, because when you get like some of the leakers, the CIA people, the people who are like starting to talk about this stuff, almost all of them are saying, look, guys, it's not just us coming out and say, oh, aliens are real. That is a domino that once it falls, it changes everything. It unravels the entire understanding of society.
Yeah.
Right? Like people say it's dark.
It falls out.
Right? Yeah. Like it can be dark and scary at times, and it's just not something. Some people just want to freaking have their life and raise their kids and not worry about this shit.
True.
And some people are like us and they want to know it all. And some people would actively prefer violently fight to not know this shit or spread it to their kids if it was true, because it's so crazy.
Everything.
Yeah.
It'll change your whole understanding.
And so I'm not saying it justifies the secrecy, but maybe it explains it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I could definitely see that. If that's true, that it's like just a super disturbing realization or some sort of like absolutely mind-bending truth.
Yeah.
That it would actually, I mean, but the thing is I don't know, but I think a lot of people would rather, I mean, maybe, and that's what happens when you get these UFO abductions, right? People finally knowing or understanding the truth. And because of that reason, they're just out of this existence. Maybe it's that dramatic, right? Like,
yeah.
Maybe
maybe you get essentially abducted and you get given an ultimatum. Like,
right.
Look, here's the thing. We plucked you off of here because you know too much shit. We can't have you going around telling people. So here's your ultimatum. We can wipe your memory and deliver you back onto the earth, or you can be inducted into the secret, but the consequence of that is you can't say shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You have to be part of the secret because not everyone wants it to be out there. So you want to know or not? The red pill and the blue pill.
Right. Perfect way.
The Matrix held over our eyes. Maybe it's more metaphoric than technological.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's just
the Matrix is like the real story of what is actually happening in this world. And it's not just like that there's some weird quantum like projection, but maybe it's just the narrative, the story, the perspective, the actual truth of the matter,
or if
what's
it's
happening.
Or if it's as simple as the understanding that we are in a simulation, right?
Yeah.
And that everything you've experienced, yes, you've seen aliens, right? You've seen this and that, but these are all programs that you wanted to see in outside here,
Yeah.
right?
So
you the understanding of this is a simulation, and as soon as you die here, you're everything's gonna, you're fine. There's no real, you're whatever. You're gonna be reincarnated basically, or you're gonna go back to the life you were living before, as if you never lived this life, and you're gonna be like, that was a crazy experience,
Yeah.
And it just goes on forever. Maybe there's just infinite levels of, and that would be pretty earth shattering to find out something like that.
Yeah.
And if it was ever revealed at any point in our history, and that the elites throughout history have been charged with the knowledge of it, you would think that maybe it would be best to just destroy the knowledge of it and just move on and be like, okay, it doesn't exist. Don't worry about it.
Well, maybe that's happened on accident. And that's what these cataclysms are. Like, it's a accidental destroying of the knowledge, right? And then, like, at that point, it's just like, oh, we're in chaos again. Let's leave Earth, right? And whoever survives here. And then it's a process for us to redevelop to the point where we're of any use to anyone. And we're rediscovering basic knowledge. And then every once in a while, like, someone who knows the whole thing, like, drops in and is like, hey guys, let me get you up to speed, and passes on the knowledge.
So many angles to attack this from. Anyway, we should probably end there.
Yeah. What an episode. That was fun.
We
haven't gone super deep, like, tying together everything. Conspiracies, but I've been waiting for, like, the right episode to go into a lot of this stuff, and it just kind of happened this time. So.
Well, and we've done it a lot, mostly with, like, the secret history stuff, which we're going to have one of those coming up soon. We're going to probably have another episode. We didn't get in any of Dean's talk with about Dan Collin or what was his name?
Dan
Warren. His talk, and we'll cover some of that on the next episode. If you like this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, follow us on Instagram and Facebook for updates on episode drops. We'd love to hear from you, so comment, leave a review and if you can't leave a review, let us know that you can't leave a review.
Yeah, leave a review
going to
Apple
some other
podcast
platform and letting us know. We want to be able to fix that if there is an issue. Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us on episode 33.
Also, email us at hosts@dualitycheck.net. That's a very direct way to get a message to us.
And if you want to support us directly without any other platform, if you prefer not to be on any other platform, you go to dualitycheck.net.
All our episodes are hosted there for free. And also, we post all of our detailed show notes on dualitycheck.net with all the pictures, all the links. When I sit there and make those, I try and think of everything related to it that I can link to. So check out the show notes. I put some work into them.
Yeah, and I'm starting to put more links into the YouTube stuff. So if you're noticing that, click on the links directly and go straight to the things we're talking about.
But yeah, let us know what you thought of our my crazy rant there.
Oh yeah,
and
somebody, if you're an animator, animate that,
dude. Yeah,
give me like a stick figure, like Spirit Science.
Honestly, I want to see a freaking like animated cartoon, like theatrical, like narrative story based in the universe I just described.
Yes.
And like season 1, you're just figuring out the peak of the conspiracy, and as the seasons unfold, you're like getting deeper and deeper.
Yes. All right, y'all.
Anyone got those chops? Let's do it.
Bye.
Adios.